Let's continue with Chapter 22 and the second line of defense by looking at fever and inflammation. Inflammation can occur in response to a variety of injuries. But in this chapter, we're just going to focus on when you have a potential infection. So the scenario we're going to look at is that you have a cut and germs are getting in through that cut. So all these little green things here represent the germs getting in through the cut. When you have an injury like this, the injured cells secrete chemicals. These chemicals stimulate the blood vessels. And they stimulate the blood vessels to do three things. The blood vessels will dilate. This will bring more blood to the injured area. The blood vessels will increase their permeability. This means they're going to become leakier. This will allow extra white blood cells and fluid to escape. And the blood vessels are going to get CAMs. This stands for cell adhesion molecule. These help the white blood cells to escape the blood and enter the injured tissue. Now let's look at what the white blood cells are doing. So we know that because we have the dilation, there's more blood coming in, which means more white blood cells. Here you can see here and here and here. These are all the white blood cells coming into the area. They go through 3 steps. Step 1 is margination. This is where a CAM catches the white blood cell. If you look closely here, these little hooks, that is a CAM. And you can see, like such as right here, those little hooks catch the white blood cell. So margination is a CAM catches the white blood cell as it flows by. Next, the white blood cell has to leave the blood. That is called diapedesis. We can see that right here. This white blood cell is crawling out of the capillary to enter the injured tissue. Once the white blood cell is out of the blood, it has to migrate to the injury. That is chemotaxis. Okay, notice this word has taxi in it. A taxi goes somewhere. Chemo is for chemical. So it's kind of like a bloodhound following the trail. The white blood cell follows the trail of the chemicals back to the injury. So you can see like this one is going this way. It's following the trail. Then once they get to the site of the injury, they fight the pathogens. So this one, you can see, is there fighting the pathogens. Okay, so that takes care of the dilating, bringing more blood, and the CAMs catching the white blood cells, and the increased permeability allowing them out. Another factor we have to look at is that extra fluid. So because you're bringing more blood, there's also more fluid coming, and the permeability lets that fluid out. This extra fluid is called exudate. So while we can see the white blood cells coming out, you would also have fluid coming out. This fluid washes through the injured area. This part is a picture showing us what exudate does. It washes through the injured area, takes those germs, the dead white blood cells, and it washes it all into your lymph. Remember, you have lymphatic capillaries where you have blood capillaries. So you're getting all this mess from the injury washed into your lymph. Your lymph is kind of the cleanup crew of the body. Remember that lymph flows through lymph nodes. So now you have all this garbage in your lymph. It's going to flow through a lymph node. And a couple of things will happen there. For one thing, in the lymph node, you have macrophages that will act like shop vacs and clean up all this mess. You also have lymphocytes, which we're going to learn all about lymphocytes pretty soon. They are your third line of immunity. So by getting the germs into the lymph and taking them to a lymph node, this is where you can activate your lymphocytes. And remember, the third line is the most powerful defense. So if you have some bad pathogens that got in through that cut, you need to get them to your lymph node so you can activate those lymphocytes that compose the third line and get the third line involved in the fight. Okay. Inflammation also has 4 cardinal signs. These are the things that always go along with inflammation. One is redness. The area is red. This is because you have extra blood there. The second is warm. Next time you have an injury and an inflamed area, just hover your hand over it and you can feel the heat coming off of it. The extra warmth there is due to the extra blood because blood carries heat, and it's also due to the increased metabolic activity. You have all these cells fighting all these germs. Cells are responding, their metabolism is revved up. And that, remember, the second law of thermodynamics, produces heat. The third one is swelling. This is a result of the exudate. And the fourth one is pain. A couple of things cause pain. One of them is pressure from the swelling. The other one is the chemicals from the injured cells. And especially bradykinin. Bradykinin is the most potent chemical that stimulates pain. And remember from back in chapter 16 about senses, pain is very important. It tells you that you have an injury so you can take care of the injury. All right, so that is inflammation. Now we can go on and look at the last part of the second line, which is fever. Remember this picture? Hopefully it's familiar. This is your hypothalamus. And if you remember from chapter 13, your hypothalamus is what controls your body temperature. So when you have a fever, it's your hypothalamus that is doing this. We're going to go through 3 different steps here. So you can see fever has onset, stadium, defervescence. We're going to start off with everything is just normal. This means that you are 98 degrees. Then you have an infection. When you get an infection, you get chemicals called pyrogens. Pyrogens stimulate your hypothalamus. And they make your hypothalamus decide to raise your temperature. So whenever you have pyrogens, your hypothalamus will decide you need to be warmer than 98. Let's suppose now that your hypothalamus decides to be 101. Fevers can vary. I just picked 101 as a typical fever number. It's not always going to be 101. Think about how you feel now. You are 98, and your brain is telling you to be 101. According to your brain, you're 3 degrees colder than what you're supposed to be. This is when you have the chills. This is the first stage, onset. This is when you know you're coming down with something. You feel cold, you shiver, you cover up with blankets. So your body is going to respond by raising your temperature. So you will shiver. You might look pale because you're going to constrict your blood vessels to conserve heat. And you're going to use behaviors. This is when you get all wrapped up in your blankets. Okay, so these actions, the shivering, the constricting the blood vessels, and the getting your blankets, raises your body temperature. So that takes us to stage 2. Stage 2 is stadium. Okay, you successfully raised your body temp. So now your hypothalamus says to be 101, and you are 101. The chills stop. This is typically when you fall asleep. This is now when you get the benefits of a fever. The fever goes to work fighting the infection. So the fever is going to inhibit pathogen reproduction. It's going to cause more CAMs on your blood vessels. It's going to make your enzymes more flexible so they can work better. And it's going to enhance your third line. So that third line, that most powerful one, works best when you have a fever. So that whole idea of needing to take Tylenol at the first sign of a fever, that's just a myth invented to make you buy more Tylenol. The fever is part of your body's defense. It's fighting the infection. Now, a fever that gets up above 104 can be dangerous and should be treated. But a low fever, and as long as it's not lasting too long, is part of your defense. You're better off to just go to sleep and let the fever do its job. So here's our picture of Stadium. He's sleeping and the fever is working. Then you go to defervescence. This is when the fever breaks. Think about how you feel when a fever breaks. You were cold, you got wrapped up in your blankets, and you fell asleep. How do you wake up? Now, your hypothalamus says to go back to 98. You are 101. Now you're 3 degrees too hot, so you feel hot. Now you have to bring your body temperature back down. So this is when you sweat. You're probably going to be flush because you dilate your blood vessels. And you wake up and you get rid of your blankets. You kick them off. So this is when you wake up all sweaty and hot and getting rid of all those blankets you bundled up in. You typically go through this cycle several times a day. So after defervescence, you'll go back to another onset. And you just continue this cycle during the course of your illness. So that wraps up the second line of defense. Next, we'll be ready to start on the third line.